Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last webinar of this food and beverage compliance series titled Food Safety and Labeling, Best Practices for Compliant Labels, where we'll discuss ingredient and labeling requirements for food products destined for the U.S. market. I'm Fabiola Negron, Director of Food Safety at Registrar Corp, and I will be moderating today. We thank you for joining us today and throughout this series, and we know you will greatly benefit from the information presented. I'm proud to introduce my colleague, Anna Benavente, Registrar Corp's Director of Product Labeling and Ingredient Review, who will be leading us today. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from the College of William and Mary and has over 15 years of experience in analytical research. Since joining Registrar Corp in 2009, her team has reviewed over 13,000 products for FDA compliance. Throughout this webinar, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box. We've saved time at the end to answer them, and we'll also follow up with a link to the recording so that you can refer to this material at any time and share with your colleagues. At the end, there will be a 3 short question survey. Please do not leave without answering these questions so you can help us improve and deliver information you want to learn about. So without any further ado, Anna, take it away.
Good morning, and thank you for that kind introduction, Fabiola. I'm very excited to be able to present to you all today. These are the topics that we'll be covering in our webinar. First, we will discuss what every food company must know before they start exporting food products to the U.S., FDA's oversight of foods, and the 2 important questions that every company must ask related to their ingredients and their labels. In our next section, we'll describe how a company determines if their product's ingredients are okay. We'll go over how FDA regulates food ingredients and designates them as safe, and common mistakes that are made by food companies before they ship. We'll also discuss the new color additive regulations and policies that FDA has issued this year that will impact your business. We'll follow up with the labeling requirements that all food labels must meet. All the general mandatory labeling elements will be described with a special focus on the nutrition label and the allergen declaration. We'll also go over additional labeling considerations such as nutrient and organic claims. Recently, FDA proposed new front of package labeling requirements as well, so we'll take a look at those too. And finally, we'll present to you Registrar Corp's solutions to help your company achieve compliance and ensure trouble-free exportation to the U.S. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Registrar Corp, we are a firm that specializes in FDA and global regulatory compliance with over 30,000 clients across 175 countries. We have 20 offices worldwide to assist our clients in their time zones and languages. We are very proud to have a high level of satisfaction from our customers and over 20 years of service to the companies in the food, supplement, cosmetic, drug, and device industries. Our label review team of experienced professionals hold multiple advanced degrees in the area of biology, chemistry, quality management, botany, human nutrition, and cosmetic sciences. We have reviewed over 13,000 products for compliance, as Fabiola mentioned, and we take enormous pride in ensuring that our clients meet FDA's requirements for food formulation and labeling. Now, as most people know, the U.S. food market is incredibly large, with revenues of almost $1 trillion projected for 2025. For many companies, marketing foods in the U.S. is a significant way to increase the value and financial growth of their businesses. Companies that successfully export to the U.S. can usually count upon a consistent revenue stream in a market that continues to expand. However, many pitfalls can occur between a company and its financial windfall in the U.S. market. FDA regulations are strict, and so a company must ask itself before it begins, what do I need to know? In the next section of this webinar, we'll describe how a company should ensure that its food products are appropriate for the U.S. market. Now, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has jurisdiction over most foods in the U.S. market. Under their authority, they issue strict regulations regarding what ingredients may be used in food products. They also have complicated regulations that govern the labeling of food products. These regulations specify what must appear on the label, as well as rules regarding claims being made about the products. Many companies make the critical mistake of thinking that FDA regulations only apply to domestic U.S. producers, but this is not the case. Imported foods must also comply with these regulations upon entry. FDA inspects food in port and will not release products that have improper ingredients or labeling, even if the importer intends to change the label after it arrives. Products must be compliant when they arrive at the port of entry. So smart companies will ask themselves two important questions before marketing their food product in the US. One, are my ingredients even permitted? Two, is the labeling correct? These two issues are extremely common causes of problems, particularly for imported foods in US ports. Now, a company may ask itself why this even matters. Many companies market their products for years without any issues or inspections. However, it is important to note that FDA does conduct inspections in port, particularly on goods from new shippers. So if a non-compliant product is found, it is usually detained. Rarely will FDA let non-compliant goods in with only a warning. If a product has an illegal ingredient in it, then it will usually be refused entry, since there's no way to remove it from the product. Products with labeling errors can be relabeled if the importer petitions FDA successfully. However, this process is expensive and time-consuming, as FDA must approve the petition and then inspect the goods after relabeling. This process can take months to resolve and can easily damage your business relationships. Also, a package with stickers covering the non-compliant information is not very attractive to a consumer and could negatively impact sales. Now, violations can result in a company being placed on what's called an import alert. In this case, all future shipments will be detained without any inspection by FDA, and this can cripple your business in the US. US-based companies may also face enforcement action from FDA. FDA monitors products that are marketed by US companies and may issue warning letters when the agency becomes aware of non-compliant products. FDA can also order seizure of products or injunction against companies who are in violation. FDA can also require companies to recall products that are in violation, for example, those that don't meet the allergen labeling requirements. Now, the consequences of noncompliance can be extremely severe. So, for example, a few years ago, we assisted a large chocolate manufacturer who had 3 shipments of their chocolate stopped in early December. They were detained based on the violations of the general labeling requirements we're going to discuss today. They were destined for fancy department stores to be sold for the Christmas season. Now, we submitted petitions to request permission to relabel, but FDA did not respond for 2 months. So it's important to understand that when you are detained, you are on their time clock, and FDA moves very slowly. Once approved, it took a few weeks to get stickers on all of the packages, and then FDA took a few weeks to come out and confirm that they were now in compliance. They were eventually released, but not until 4 months after they were initially detained. And so the company missed the holiday shopping season and Valentine's Day as well, and it was a big blow to their business. So proper labels would have prevented this fiasco. And the lesson here is that detentions are expensive, time-consuming, and a huge problem for a supply chain. They should be avoided at all costs. So how does one go about figuring out whether the products are okay or might be in danger of being detained or other enforcement action? You have 2 basic steps to eliminate some of this risk. 1, is my formulation okay? Conduct a check of your ingredients to make sure that they are permitted in the US. Then select only those products with formulations that will be acceptable to FDA. 2, is my labeling okay? For these selected products, review the labeling and revise as necessary before shipping. Remember, relabeling in port is expensive and time-consuming if FDA even allows you to do it. Prevent the need for relabeling by making sure it's correct before you send your products to the US market. So many companies are uncertain as how to determine if their ingredients are acceptable for the US market. In this section of the webinar, we'll explain how FDA regulates ingredients and where they publish their regulations. FDA has three main classifications for ingredients: food additives, substances that are generally recognized as safe, also called GRAS, and color additives. By law, all substances added to food must be approved by FDA through a food additive petition process, unless they are generally recognized as safe. GRAS substances are recognized as safe for their intended use by qualified experts, either through scientific procedures or through a history of common use in food. Color additives, though, even though those from natural sources, must all be approved by FDA. They are never considered GRAS. In order to figure out if your ingredients fall into one of these categories, you will need to research some specific resources. The U.S. Code of Federal Regulations includes all of the food additives and color additives that have been approved by FDA. It also includes regulations where FDA has affirmed that certain substances are GRAS. It is important to pay close attention to these regulations, as they will tell you exactly what products and intended uses are covered. For example, some are permitted generally in food, but others may be limited to only particular types of food or for certain specific uses. Now, GRAS status is not limited to these FDA GRAS affirmations. GRAS status is based upon the opinion of the scientific community as a whole. So companies are permitted to self-affirm an ingredient as GRAS using data that is public or privately held. Now, if a company chooses to self-affirm an ingredient as GRAS, then they should make sure they have the data available in the event that FDA requests proof of their ingredient status. Now, FDA has a process by which a company can actually submit what is called a GRAS notice to inform the FDA that they have determined an ingredient as GRAS. FDA may then respond whether they have any questions or concerns regarding the company's data, or if they disagree and do not think that the data supports a GRAS conclusion. Now, unfortunately, many companies don't perform any sort of compliance check on their products prior to marketing, and then find out the hard way that their ingredients are not permitted in the US market. One of the most common mistakes are illegal colors, because FDA must approve every color additive, even those from safe natural sources. Colors that are common in other markets, such as Ponceau 4R and Carmesine, are not permitted in the US. Another common color additive issue concern colors that are subject to what is called batch certification, a requirement from FDA. These colors require that a sample from the actual batch must be sent to FDA for them to test it. So for example, Allura Red must be certified by FDA as FD&C Red number 40. Brilliant Blue is another example. It must be certified as FD&C Blue number 1. Other ingredients that can cause issues are artificial sweeteners such as cyclamates and dulcin, which are not approved by FDA and are actually on a specific prohibited list. Now, recently FDA issued a final order that essentially bans partially hydrogenated oils due to their trans fat content. So products from other markets where they are permitted should not be sent to the US. Stevia, which is an immensely popular sweetener now, does have purity specifications that must be met. FDA has an import alert for it, along with other ingredients such as tamarind, where FDA will stop these products and force the importer to prove that they meet FDA's requirements before entering the US market. And then finally, CBD. CBD is very confusing because individual states in the US permit it, but at the federal level, it is not permitted to be added to food. Now, keeping up with ingredient regulations and doing a thorough check is very important, as regulations do change from time to time. For example, this year FDA has banned FD&C Red number 3, a common color additive used in all sorts of products, including candy. The FDA is revoking the authorization and will enforce it beginning January 15th, 2027 for food products. If you are using this color, you should start the formulation process now to ensure that it is removed from all products destined for the U.S. market. You will also want to ensure that your supply chain is vetted so that products containing this color do not accidentally get sent to the U.S. In April of this year, FDA announced its intent to work with industry to remove petroleum-based dyes from the U.S. marketplace and transition to natural alternatives. As part of this initiative, FDA will be revoking the authorizations of two color additives, Orange B and Citrus Red No. 2. FDA has also stated that it will work with industry to remove the rest of the approved petroleum-based colors by the end of 2026. This impacts very common color additives such as red 40, green 3, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, and blue 2. What is not entirely clear is how FDA will convince industry to voluntarily reformulate their product lines with naturally sourced colors that may not provide the same color intensity and will have different chemical compositions, which may cause issues in their formulations with texture and stability. At this time, FDA appears not to intend to propose formal revocation of these colors and would like industry to voluntarily comply. Interestingly, yesterday, Kraft made the announcement that they will be working to remove these colors from their products, which really sent shockwaves, honestly, through the industry. It's quite amazing that a company of that size is going to comply voluntarily. So we will see whether or not the remainder of industry will follow suit. We hope to get more information from FDA regarding this initiative as the year progresses, and we'll see if additional companies go ahead and decide to do the same as Kraft. So now, also in its efforts to transition the food industry to naturally sourced colors, FDA is asking industry to remove FD&C Red No. 3 ahead of the compliance deadline of 2027. They've also approved several new colors that are naturally sourced: calcium phosphate, Galdera extract blue, and added uses to the approval for butterfly pea flower extract. And so this is new colors naturally sourced to replace these synthetic colors that FDA is trying to phase out of the market. Now, once a company has determined that their products are formulated correctly, it is incredibly important that the labeling be reviewed to ensure that it is compliant. So for non-US companies, the labeling is the first thing that an FDA compliance officer will see when your product arrives in port. For US companies, labeling is a very common cause for warning letters issued by the agency. So in this section, we'll discuss the mandatory labeling requirements for food products. There are certain statements that must always appear on food labeling for the most part, as shown here, that we'll discuss in depth in the next few slides. Now, first and foremost is the statement of identity, what the product actually is. FDA requires that it be the name specified by law, the common or usual name used in the marketplace, but not a brand name, or a fanciful name understood by the general public. So for example, most of us are probably familiar with the brand Oreo and understand what that is, but that is not a statement of identity. Oreo labels include a statement of identity, usually chocolate sandwich cookies, to meet this requirement. Now, some products are subject to what is called a standard of identity. This is when FDA dictates what the characteristics are for a product being identified by a particular name. So these requirements can include permitted ingredients, certain manufacturing methods that must be conducted, similar specifications. So examples include ice cream, jam, margarine, and peanut butter. And there are about 280 of them, so you will want to determine if your product is subject to one. Now, the statement of identity is also subject to special requirements based on flavor declarations, if there are juice ingredients, when the product is in a specific form, like frozen, and more. Now, the next mandatory statement that we'll discuss is the net quantity of contents. You must declare the actual quantity of product in the container. Solid and viscous products are declared by weight and must include the term or the abbreviation for net weight. Liquid products are usually declared in terms of volume. Note that you must include both metric and imperial terms of measurement. So this is another common cause for detention. When a product enters and it declares its weight in grams, but does not include the amount in ounces. Every food product label needs to declare either the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. You may choose any one of these three options to meet this requirement. Now note that you must include the actual corporate name and the full address, although you may omit the street address if it is found in a local directory. You may not use a P.O. box. And FDA must have a way to contact and find a responsible party if they discover a problem with the product. Now, most foods, except for single ingredient foods, must declare all of their ingredients on the package. Most of these ingredients must be declared by their common or usual name. You can't use E or INS numbers. Also, most have to be declared individually in descending order and not grouped together in parentheses. However, there are some exceptions to the rules for certain ingredients, such as flavors, colors, and some spices. Now, a few years ago, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, issued new rules regarding the disclosure of bioengineered ingredients. USDA maintains a list of foods that are generally considered to be genetically modified. So if your food product has an ingredient on that list, or if you know that any ingredient in your food is the product of bioengineering, then you must disclose it on the label. USDA gives several options on how to meet this requirement, including use of a symbol. And so even though this rule was issued by USDA, it impacts FDA-regulated product labeling as well. Now, while not an FDA requirement, it is important to know that U.S. Customs and Border Protection has a labeling requirement for the country of origin. This is the country where the last substantial transformation took place, and it must appear on all retail food labels. Also know that you may only use abbreviations for countries that are deemed acceptable by customs. So for example, PRC is not an acceptable abbreviation for China, as a U.S. consumer may not be familiar with it and would not realize that it stands for the People's Republic of China. Now, the next and usually most difficult part of mandatory food labeling is the nutrition facts label. FDA has very specific requirements for format, content, and type sizes. And unlike some markets, where nutrition labeling is simply based off 100 grams or 100 milliliter amounts of the product, for FDA nutrition charts, a serving size must be declared based on a reference amount for that exact food, which is established in regulation by FDA. Now, there are also additional dual column chart requirements that are new, and these are for products in packages that might be consumed in a single sitting. And then there are also different formats for infant and toddler foods and when there's more than one product in the package. Now, we've pulled together some examples from other countries to illustrate how different the FDA chart is. Here you can see the US food chart, the US FDA chart, compared to charts from the UK, Australia, and Mexico. So they are very different, and it is obvious to FDA inspectors when a product comes in with a label that's not in compliance with this requirement. So any inspector that sees this mistake is bound to detain the product and refuse it unless the importer petitions for permission to relabel it. Now, FDA has multiple chart formats that are permitted on food labeling, but they are subject to certain conditions. To the left, we see the simplified format, which is permitted on certain products that don't have a lot of nutrient value. So this might be oils, gum, candy, soda, this sort of thing. Then on the upper right side of the panel and the bottom panel, we see two tabular charts that are permitted on certain size packaging. And in the middle is the linear format, permitted only on very small packaging. Then you also see the dual column example to the bottom right. Now, if you choose to use any of these nutrition facts panels, you must be sure that your package and your product qualify. Allergens are an important part of food labeling and a very common cause for product recalls and other similar issues. Accurate allergen declarations are an important safety and labeling issue. FDA has 9 mandatory food allergens that require disclosure: milk, eggs, fish, crustacean shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soybeans, and sesame. Now you may declare them as part of the ingredient name, such as wheat flour, in parentheses next to the ingredient in the list, or declare all of them in a contained statement adjacent to the list. Now, food safety professionals must be aware that allergens can be a significant safety issue. According to Forbes magazine, half of all food recalls in 2023 were related to undeclared allergens on the labeling, an 8% increase from the year before. Now, some of this increase may be due to the addition of sesame to the list of allergens in 2023, with companies unaware and therefore their labels lacking the declaration. But as we can all imagine, undeclared allergens are a significant regulatory and also a legal liability. If a consumer has an allergic reaction to your product and it was not properly labeled, it could open your firm to the threat of legal action and significant financial losses. In order to mitigate this risk, companies must confirm that all allergens are declared on the labeling and implement procedures to ensure accuracy. This means having a deep understanding not only of the ingredients in your product, but also the source ingredients that might contain allergens. So for example, if your lecithin is soy or your modified starch is from wheat, these need to be disclosed. If you use flavor ingredients that are just declared as natural flavor on the labeling, it won't be immediately apparent that they are derived from a major allergen like fish or egg. Also, even though present in minute amounts, processing aids could potentially trigger an allergenic response and might need to be included in the allergen declaration. Now, sometimes allergens become present due to cross-contamination in the food, for example, in the processing facility. So in such cases, it may be smart to add advisory labeling, such as may contain or produced on equipment that also processes a particular allergen. FDA acknowledges the use of these sorts of statements, but does warn companies that they are not a suitable replacement for rigorous manufacturing practices to mitigate the chance that cross-contamination can take place. Now, in addition to the regulations regarding the mandatory statements that must appear, FDA has a maze of regulations related to other labeling issues such as claims. FDA dictates when such claims can be made. For example, nutrient content claims refer to levels of a nutrient in foods such as high in fiber, low fat, and healthy. FDA sets nutrient levels and other conditions that must be met in order for a label to bear the claim. Health claims refer to a risk reduction in disease that may occur due to consumption of the food. A health claim must be pre-approved by FDA. Structure function claims reference the effects to the structure or function of the body due to consumption of food, but may not reference disease. These claims are not pre-approved by FDA, but must be truthful and based on the nutritive value of the food. Now, another common labeling element are additional languages. Note that your labels must have all mandatory statements in English. If any other language is present, then all mandatory statements must appear in that language too. Now, brand names or mottos may be exempt from this requirement though, as they do not convey material information about the product. Now, due to a strong marketing advantage and consumer desire for clean labels, organic foods are now a significant part of the U.S. market. In order to make this claim, your food will likely need to be certified by an agent that is accredited by the USDA. The claim itself will be based upon the percentage of organic ingredients in the product, and the agent's information should appear on the label. Front of package labeling has been present in the marketplace for quite a few years and has been voluntary. There are many ways that it's been added to food labels. Some systems have used symbols to characterize the overall nutrient value of a food. Others have focused on individual nutrient levels. So here we see a few examples, such as some front of package labeling that's found on General Mills cereals, the guiding star symbol used by some US retailers, and the sensible solution mark that's used by Kraft. Up until now, FDA has only objected if the agency determined that the front of package statements are false or misleading, or if they were in violation of the regulations that govern nutrient content claims. However, in its mission to help consumers make healthier food choices, FDA has now issued a proposed rule to require front of package labeling on most food products. Now, FDA's proposed rule will require a nutrition info box that lists the percent daily values of saturated fats, sodium, and added sugars, and then characterizes them as low, medium, or high. This will be required for most foods intended for people aged 4 years and older, so not required for toddler or infant foods. There will also be a voluntary declaration of calories that can be made adjacent to the box. And FDA will have special labeling provisions for certain packages, such as small packages, and those that have more than one product. Now, right now, this is a proposed rule, so the public can still send in comments. Note, though, that it's only proposed. It's not final and could change, and it could change dramatically, which is what we saw back in 2016 with the Nutrition Facts label. The final version was very different from what was proposed in 2014, so please do not add this to your food labels yet. It could very well change when a final rule is issued. And all in all, companies need to be vigilant in ensuring that their labels meet FDA's requirements. So here are 5 common mistakes, many of which I actually found on a detention notice this morning for a company that did not do the compliance check before shipping. They have several noodle products sitting in port with many of these labeling violations. Now, it's very common in other markets to permit declaring ingredients by E or INS numbers, but that is not the case here. Please be sure you're using the common name. Then we often see companies using nutrition charts that are permitted only on small packages, not understanding the limitations of their use. And then because the majority of the world relies on the metric system, many labels arrive to the US without the mandatory declaration in ounces or fluid ounces. And again, it's very common for labels to bear claims such as high in vitamin A, but the product does not have enough of the nutrient to qualify. And then last but not least, if there's any non-English statement on your label, you will probably need to reproduce all of the mandatory statements in that language. So now we hope that the information that we've presented gives you a good overview of how to check your product's formulation and labeling to determine if it will meet FDA requirements. Now, if you still find that the rules and regulations are too confusing and you want an expert to look over your products before you ship, Registrar Corp is here to help. We have many solutions to help you make sure that your labels meet FDA's requirements, and we offer varying levels of assistance to meet your exact needs. Now, as I mentioned before, it's critical to make sure your formulation consists only of ingredients that are permitted, as well as making sure the labeling is correct. Our Label Comply service gives you one-on-one assistance with an experienced regulatory specialist who will do a complete evaluation of your ingredients and labeling. We conduct a thorough analysis of the label for each of the mandatory statements we discussed today and make recommendations for changes to bring your label and product into compliance. We issue a report that includes all of our recommendations, and we will provide you with a print-ready graphic that has been revised to be in compliance with FDA's labeling requirements. So you can just print it and use it and be on your way. Now, the service also, though, includes a 30-day period where you can ask questions and get an extra round of graphic changes to that label at no additional charge if you would like. Also, any client that uses our Label Comply service can count on our continued support as long as they use that revised label. If FDA questions any label we produce, Registrar Corp will intervene at no cost to you, of course, to communicate with FDA and provide the research we conducted to support the compliance of the label. Now, if you are feeling pretty confident that your label is compliant, but you still want the reassurance of a group of experienced professionals looking it over, Registrar Corp offers our label check report option. Our team will look over the 10 mandatory elements that should appear and give you guidance regarding any potential issues that we find and instructions on what changes you should make prior to exporting it to the US. A report will summarize the changes and you'll receive 30 minutes of consultation after delivery to go over our findings. For companies that are still in the process of developing their formulations or that are concerned that their ingredients may not be approved in the US, Registrar Corp's Ingredient Review Service can provide peace of mind prior to export. We will review all of the ingredients in your product to verify that they are either affirmed as safe, approved as food additives, or approved as color additives by FDA. So you can save yourself the heartache of a refused shipment or a warning letter visible to all your customers by ensuring that your ingredients are permitted before you export. Now, if you're feeling pretty confident about your labeling, but do want some help with that complicated nutrition facts label, Registrar Corp offers a service that will give you one-on-one assistance from a regulatory specialist who will help you figure out the proper reference amount and serving size for your product, as well as determining the proper modified label format that may be permitted for your product and package. We will provide you with a print-ready graphic and a report that details each recommendation and regulation used to develop your nutrition facts label. For companies that have a good working knowledge of the nutrition facts requirements, Registrar Corp also offers a do-it-yourself solution. Our nutrition labeling software and recipe management tool will help you produce your nutrition labeling for the US as well as other markets. Allergens is our software solution, which offers downloadable charts for the US, UK, Canadian, Mexican, and EU markets based off of a single recipe for the product. It's subscription-based with lots of flexibility depending on your needs. We have many other ways to help you as you export your foods to the US. Registrar Corp offers a full range of compliance services, all of which are fixed fee. So we can assist you with many FDA requirements, such as food facility registration and US agent, prior notice, low acid and canned food requirements, food safety plans, and services to meet the requirements of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. We can also help you if your products are being detained or are on an import alert. So if you get detained, don't give up right away. Send us the FDA's notice of detention, called a notice of action, and we will give you a free assessment and see if and how you may be able to get them released. We look forward to assisting you with successful exportation of your products to the US market. Now, we're also pleased to announce the launch of our label review services for Canada and Mexico. We offer label comply and label check services to prepare your product labeling so that you may market your product in Canada. Then we also have label comply services along with the constancia that is necessary to ensure your product labels compliance in the Mexican market. So if you plan to export to either country, please reach out to us if you need any assistance. Now, what if you are unsure if you need any assistance? If you're not sure whether or not your product labels are compliant to the US market, we are here to help. You may send your product labels to us for a free assessment. We will check to see if they appear to have any compliance issues related to the mandatory labeling requirements we discussed today. Our team of regulatory advisors will provide you with our comments and can give you information regarding our services in case you need to change your labels before you ship them to the US, Mexico, or Canada. Now, if you found this webinar informative and want to learn more about the newest developments in FDA regulations, join me on July 9th to discuss the newest proposals from the Trump administration regarding the self-affirmation GRAS process and their plans to modify it or eliminate it entirely. You can sign up for this on our website. And then we also have a special discount for you all as our thanks for attending the webinar today. You will receive $200 off the full label comply service or $100 off the label check service between now and June 25th. It's our flash sale. So simply mention it to your regulatory advisor and the discount will be applied. Thank you all so much for your time and attention, and we really appreciate it. And I hope that you found it helpful. We'll also be having a drawing for a free 1-hour consultation with me from the attendees that complete our post-webinar survey. So when our webinar ends, you'll see a pop-up message inviting you to take the survey. Please take the survey and let us know how we did. We welcome all feedback and suggestions for this or any future webinars that you might like to see. Really enjoy, Fabiola and I love giving webinars. We really want to know what sort of topics we should cover, what you all might find useful and helpful. And so please do give us that feedback. I will reach out to the winner of our drawing directly and make arrangements for our consultation. Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and open our webinar up for any questions that you may have. I know some people have, I see raised hands or potentially put questions in the chat. Please go ahead and put those all in the Q&A box, and so that we'll just access them from there. And thank you again for attending today. We all appreciate it so much.
Yes, thank you so much for participating. We have a lot of questions. We may not be able to get through every single one during this webinar, but we will do our best to address as many as we can. And we've already begun to respond to some of your questions via the chat. So a first questions from Justina, I will summarize. They created their labels with nutritional information based on calculated results. However, when they tested the product, the calculated results weren't in accordance to what they had calculated. So she's asking if they can place a sticker with the correct nutritional information over the existing printed data so that they don't have to use new labels.
Okay, great question. And unfortunately, one that's common. Nutrient values in foods can vary widely, particularly if you have agricultural ingredients, where maybe seasonally they might have different composition. So that is a challenge a lot of people face. You can use stickers. You will just want to make sure that they cover up the non-compliant information and that they are firmly affixed and won't come off. But yes, FDA has specifically stated that you are permitted to use stickers for this type of situation.
Thank you. Joanna asks about bulk labeling, and I saw many people also ask about what are the requirements for bulk labeling or product that are ingredients to be further processed.
Okay, so for bulk labeling, we generally recommend that you adhere to all of the mandatory labeling requirements that we've discussed, with the exception of the nutrition facts panel. You absolutely don't have to have that on a wholesale or bulk product that's not going to be received by a consumer. Now, we also do recommend, just so it's clear when it comes through port, that you put something to the effect of for further processing, not for retail sale, for wholesale only. Food service products also are exempted in many cases from the nutrition facts label. For those types of products, we recommend making it very, very clear that it's not going to be for retail sale. The idea is, even though you may hear that you don't have to have all of those other mandatory statements, the idea really is to not give an FDA inspector any reason to stop the product and take a look. You want them to see it, see all the information there, that's great, and then let it in and just have it may proceed. If they start to question what's on the labeling or they're concerned about the nature of the product, they could stop. And even if your product is fine, that can mean weeks of delays. So we recommend just put it, the more information, the better. Again, put it all on there, everything we've discussed, with the exception of that nutrition facts panel.
Our next question is regarding GRAS. So they want to know if there are any changes to the GRAS given the current administration.
So yes, within the last 2 months, the Trump administration and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, have been talking about that self-affirmation pathway that we discussed for GRAS substances. And so that's why I'm talking about it on July 9th. Please come to my webinar. We're going to be talking about what sort of moves they've made so far, what potentially they could do. What will this look like? Will they be putting forth regulations, or will they be doing like they are doing with the colors and just asking industry to voluntarily stop self-affirming? So we'll be discussing all of that on July 9th. Thankfully, there will be time. So if you're concerned about it, don't worry that something's going to happen in the next, month or two. Any sort of rulemaking or policy shifts will probably take a while to implement. But yeah, join me on the 9th. We'll be going through all of this because it is a pretty substantial shift in how ingredients will be regulated if this goes through.
Awesome. So Tessa asks if all of the regulations apply when importing supplements for pigeons.
Okay, so animal feed or pet food, everything we've discussed for the most, well, actually, I won't even say that. The nutrition facts panel is for human food, not for animal feed or pet food. However, a lot of the other elements are required on animal feed because FDA regulates them too. So the labeling regulations mimic kind of what they have for human food. There is, however, other information that you need to know for animal feed. There's an organization called the Association of American Feed Control Officials, AFCO, and they work hand in hand with FDA, and they produce what are called model bills that suggest to individual U.S. states what labeling requirements should be. So, for example, if you've looked at pet food in the United States, you'll see instead of a nutrition chart, it has a guaranteed analysis statement. That's not an FDA requirement. That's an AFCO model bill requirement. And it's pretty much implemented, across the states. So if you have animal feed, we actually are able to assist you with that as well. We have label review services for animal feed and for pet food. So if you need assistance and guidance in that way, please do reach out to us and we'd love to help you with that.
Anita asks, where can someone look for most up-to-date notification of the approved and removed ingredients?
So usually it will mean diving into the regulations. There are a couple of different places that you go. Of course, you go to the Code of Federal Regulations to see what's in there. Monitoring FDA's, getting on their email list, can help too because they'll make announcements that way. For the GRAS notices that have been filed by industry, there's an inventory on their website that you can find. So to really do a thorough check of your ingredients means going to all these resources and finding out, for calcium phosphate, what is out there? What has FDA said it's affirmed as safe or approved as a food additive for? Or go find out if somebody else in industry has actually filed a notice with FDA to say that it's GRAS for use. So, our ingredient review that I mentioned, this is what we do. For each ingredient, we'll go and find every statement from FDA on their website, in their regulations, in their policy guides to state whether or not it's appropriate for use in your food.
Lauren asks, if you are using multiple natural flavors, characterizing and non-characterizing flavors in your product, can you group them together in your ingredient statement, especially if you are specifying the characterizing flavor on the PDP?
Yes, we are talking about our favorite and least favorite regulation, 21 CFR 101.22, that goes into great detail and somewhat confusing detail about how flavors are to be declared. Usually what we will do is the ingredients list, there is the permission, to just group flavors together as natural flavors or artificial flavors and just sort of leave it at that. You raise a great example, though, if there's a characterizing flavor that is mentioned on the PDP, the Principal Display Panel, for example, strawberry flavored shortcake or something like that, but you're using other natural flavors to enhance it, like lime or lemon, you may need to go ahead and either declare it as those as artificial flavors, or if you have enough strawberry flavor to characterize it itself, you may need to add with other natural flavors. So that's my convoluted response to basically say in the ingredients list, you're probably still okay to just declare them as natural flavors, but do pay close attention to 101.22 and take a look and see, do you need to have an additional artificial or natural flavor statement in order to make sure that it's not misleading according to that regulation.
Mandy asks, if the product is manufactured in the USA and a distributor information is listed, do we still need to put product of USA?
So what's interesting in this scenario is if you are making a product of USA claim or a made in USA claim, you're actually subject to the FTC's requirements. It's not a country, it's not a country of origin statement. It's not CBP, it's not FDA regulated. It's regulated by the FTC because here it has such a marketing advantage. So if you have a product where all of your raw materials, all of your manufacturing, everything is US sourced, then you could make the made in the USA claim. If you have raw materials maybe that are not US sourced, then you are sometimes permitted to do a qualified claim, such as manufactured in the US with imported ingredients. However, any made in the USA claim is voluntary. So you don't have to put it on your label. So that's why in our market you see plenty of products that don't say made in the USA and they don't include a country of origin statement either. In those cases, educated guess is going to be that it's manufactured in the US, but the raw materials themselves are not sourced in the US. But again, that's an FTC requirement and it's voluntary. So if you do use it, just make sure you're in compliance with their rules for it.
Marco asks, is country of origin EU enough for the label information for the US market, or must it have the exact country where the last significant process is made?
So glad you asked that because made in the EU is not sufficient as a as a country of origin statement. It needs to be the actual country, and so that can cause a problem upon import if it's not declared according to the CBP's regulations.
Okay. If a product's nutrition facts panel and ingredient list include foreign languages, are any claim logos such as non-GMO or gluten-free also required to be translated into those foreign languages?
Excellent question. So the way that the regulation is written, it describes the bilingual requirement as being, I guess, specific to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And so that really only means the FDA regulated statements that are on the labeling. However, USDA has language requirement rules as well. CBP doesn't really, but to be honest, we just recommend just don't even take a chance. Just go ahead and translate it. If you're already translating the rest of the label into a different language other than English, go ahead and translate those as well.
Maria asks, just to confirm, if a product only has one ingredient, say cane sugar, there's no need to include ingredient list on the label.
Correct. However, again, just to be on the safe side, we will often recommend that companies go ahead and put an ingredients list naming that one ingredient just so it's clear that it's a single ingredient product. So for example, if you had flour and it was just flour, there were no other ingredients, an inspector could take a look and say, yeah, but is there an anti-caking agent in here? Stop the product, inquire with the importer, take weeks to respond, hold up your shipment, only to be told, yes, indeed, there's no anti-caking agent. And he says, okay, and then he lets it in. That's all well and good. You've not been detained, but it has taken a few weeks for all of that to happen. And so even for single ingredient foods, we usually recommend put the ingredient statement on there just so it's 100% clear. Another kind of similar example is, the regulations for certain colors will allow you to just simply put artificial color or color added. We always recommend name it, even if you're allowed to just use one of those terms, because we had a client who brought in a product that had titanium dioxide as a color. You are allowed to just put color added or artificial color for that one. However, FDA saw it and wanted to know what's the color. Our poor client had to pull together recipe formulations, specification sheets from the manufacturer to prove it was titanium dioxide, and that titanium dioxide did not have to be named and we could use color added. And yes, it got released, but that took a month. So the more transparent and informative the label is, the better off you are when it's coming through port if it goes through an inspection by an FDA officer.
Awesome. So Danilo asks, is it necessary to include on the labeling or packaging of exported foods details about the technology used for their preservation, such as the use of different concentrations of gases like CO2 or oxygen in the export of perishable products, proteins, and fruits?
So it may very well depend on the method and the type of product. So for example, if you're talking about seafood that's been treated in a certain way, you may need to declare, the preserving agent, particularly if it's a gas, as an ingredient. Um, in cases like that, I would encourage you to reach out to us directly with the situation so that we can provide you kind of streamlined guidance, because it can vary quite a bit, whether it would be considered just an incidental or a secondary direct food additive, or whether it would need to be named on the ingredients list.
Maria asks, are there mandatory nutrients that need to be present in the nutrition facts regardless of food type?
So yes, the FDA nutrition facts label, there are 15 mandatory nutrients, in essence, that you need to know what their levels are in the food. And others are considered voluntary, like vitamin A and folic acid and all of those. You don't necessarily need to know those unless you've actually fortified the product with them. But for your basic food, you need to know the 15 mandatory nutrients. Now, once you know that, you may be able to figure out whether you can go ahead and use the simplified format, whether you can use some of the other modifications that FDA requires, or I'm sorry, FDA allows, like using the not a significant source statement, and there's some other workarounds, but you do need to have the nutrient values for those 15.
Joe asks, would your services work with supplement companies? How would any of what was discussed pertain to supplements?
Okay. Yes, we do plenty of dietary supplement label reviews as well. A lot of the requirements are the same, with the exception of the supplement facts chart that is on dietary supplements replaces that nutrition facts chart. And you also need to know that the supplement facts chart is very different. We see a lot of people try and use the nutrition facts chart and just replace it with supplement facts at the top, but that's not how the supplement facts chart works. It pinpoints those 15 mandatory nutrients, but then also what the other dietary ingredients are. So for example, if you have a ginseng supplement, that would go in a supplement facts chart. It would never go in a nutrition facts chart though. Then there's some other requirements, like with claims. Dietary supplements have a little more leeway with claims than conventional foods do. And so we can actually assist you with that to make sure that they're considered appropriate by FDA. And then there's also the ubiquitous FDA disclaimer. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, that you see on the dietary supplement labels in the US. And then they also have a requirement for an adverse event reporting contact that has to appear on the label, and it has to be a US domestic phone number or mailing address.
Okay, we're going to take our last question. If the information panel does not have sufficient space to list the ingredients, NFT, and the distributor information, can those three elements be listed in separate panels?
So there are small package modifications that are permitted. For example, with the nutrition facts chart, if you go into the regulation that governs that, I'm trying to remember the exact citation, but it's like 21 CFR 101.9J, I or J, that will have these requirements for you. If you're not sure where to look, come to us. Our services can assist with all of this. There's also some allowances to present some of the information on the PDP, on the principal display panel, while putting the other information on the information panel. So for example, you might be able to put your ingredients list on the PDP and then the other information on the information panel.
All right. So we're done with our question and answer.
Okay, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Please do remember we have the self-affirmation Gross webinar on the 9th. We have our flash sale. If you're interested in label review services, please do reach out. We'll give you a wonderful discount between now and the 25th of June. Also, some other that we're planning, kind of touched on detentions. And in August, we don't have a date yet, but we're planning on having a webinar dedicated to detentions and import alerts to kind of discuss how FDA detains products, how they can be resolved, and what you can do if you end up on an import alert. And again, reach out to Registrar Corp. We're here to help industry. Fabiola's got an amazing team of food safety professionals. My labeling team, has lots of experience, and we're absolutely here to help you ensure that you don't have issues with any of your products as you start sending them to the U.S. And with that, I will say thank you again, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.